guess what? It's time for another episode of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers. I am your host, Carl Franklin in New London, Connecticut, and guess what? Mark Dunn isn't here this week because he's teaching in Redmond. As a matter of fact, he's teaching some architecture out there in Redmond at Microsoft to a whole bunch of people, not just Microsoft people. Well, anyway, I want to just apologize for sort of skipping the month of February. We've both, Mark and I, have been absolutely every week we've been training and teaching. It's just out of nowhere, the demand just spiked up in February. And unfortunately, we didn't have our gig racks, our portable gig racks in place. So we didn't really have the opportunity to, do a show from a hotel room or something. However, this is something that we're doing, and we hope that in the future we're going to be able to bring those things with us, and from whatever hotel room we're supposedly in, we can record a show. So that's the goal, and I thank you for being patient with us. Tonight's guest is none other than Scott Hanselman, Chief Architect for Carillion Corporation. He is the MSDN Regional Director for Oregon, and he's just got a lot of great content to share with you tonight. So without any further ado, I'm just going to introduce him. Hello, Scott.
Hello.
Now, I noticed that you're the Regional Director for Oregon. When we talked with Chris Sells, he is sort of like an honorary RD. What's the story with that anyway?
Well, the regional directors originally started out being literally a regionally focused extranet of evangelists. So my primary focus was to worry about the Portland metropolitan area, and there was a guy in Seattle, and there's a guy in Idaho. But as the world shrinks, the Portland market is the Portland market. But I spend time speaking I was in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I was in England, and I was in Germany talking. So I don't necessarily focus regionally. And the more and more, I think the RDs, yourself included, spend time locally, but we are as globally focused as ever, and there's nobody better to speak to the world about .NET than Chris Sells. So having him join the RD community, even though he happens to live kind of down the street from us, was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I agree. So we as regional directors are there to support the local development community and also sort of act as a liaison between the local Microsoft office and that community. But as you're pointing out, that this is just a group of people, then if you have two heavy hitters from the same city, the regional part of it just goes out the window. So
I mean, who wouldn't want two Michael Jordans on a team? You're
exactly.
Not going to throw one out just because. An example would be myself, Chris, Bill Vaughn, and Chris Kinsman.
Right.
All RDs in the Pacific Northwestern sense were all at a presentation at Microsoft recently. So yeah, I'm totally jazzed to have Chris involved.
Well, I've really enjoyed some of the things that have come across my inbox from you on the regional director list. One of the coolest things that I remember that you did was that you wrote an operating system in C# in college, and just an amazing amount of popularity about this. How did that happen?
That was kind of a strange thing. For some reason, when I end up writing code for school, I just can't stand the idea that I'm going to turn this code in and someone's going to sit on it, and it's not going to be used. It was just an assignment. I've been trying to squeeze my 4-year Bachelor's of Science in Software Engineering into the last 11 years. Right now I'm Chief Architect at Carillion, so I do that kind of 50-hour-a-week job, and then in the evenings from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I go to school at the Oregon Institute of Technology, and then kind of eat, sleep, code, study, rinse, repeat has been my life for the last several years. And I'll be graduating in June, and there was an advanced operating systems class where we were to write an operating system and an abstract CPU given literally just a specification document. And in my little OS distributable, I include that document. We were given a number of things, like it's a 32-bit CPU. It has these specific instructions, this instruction set for incrementing a register. These are how wide the registers are. All the different kinds of things you would expect in any theoretical CPU operating system environment. And the rules were I was supposed to write it in either C++ or in Java. C++, I felt that I would be spending more time bit twiddling and pointer dereferencing
Right.
if I wrote it in C++, and less time truly understanding the concepts of an OS, memory management, paging, memory protection, scheduling, threading. That's what I was there to learn. I didn't want to spend a lot of time. I've lived in C++ for 10 years. I don't want to do that. It's not my It's not the language my brain speaks.
Right.
C#, my brain speaks C#, and that's, when I started writing C# for the first time, I realized, so this is this programming language. It's been in the lizard part of my brain for the last 10 years, and finally someone's given it a name.
Yeah. Now, this is all a theoretical operating system? Does it run?
It totally runs. It runs on top of .NET, so it would be like an operating system emulator, for example.
All right, good.
So you would give it, there's a little tiny assembly language that it's custom instruction set that you give it.
Right.
It acts as an interpreter right now.
Okay.
But you give it this byte stream. It loads it up into its memory, so its memory might be 256 bytes. That's bytes, not kbytes.
Right.
So, and it has 11 registers, and it has an instruction pointer, and it has a stack, and it has a code segment and a data segment, and all the things all those logical constructs that you would think about when thinking about the CPU or an OS represented in a physical sense in .NET.
Cool.
It's command line driven, and you can hand it, you can type TinyOS and then give it 4, 5, 6 applications. It'll manage scheduling between them.
Wow.
It's all written in C# entirely. And one of the things that was great about this is I had to convince the teacher to let me do it. Because this was a scholastic academia guy.
Right.
He was like, Java or C++ are the only real languages. .NET is beta. And I'm like, it's been out for a year. And he says, no, it's beta. We can't do that. Trust me. Let me just do this. It was an 8-week class. It was a summer session. Had to get it done fast. Because the concepts were really what I felt I was writing to. I was writing a scheduler, writing a memory manager, writing a pager. For example, swapping out memory.
Yeah.
Let's say that I'm going to be dealing with a 256-byte memory space.
That's insane.
But my address space is a full K, a luxurious full 1024 bytes.
Right.
It's time to swap something out. I've done a least recently used algorithm, and basically we've got a victim page that needs to be paged out to disk. Well, I could write a bunch of code to do that, or I could just make a memory page object and serialize it. So one of the little ironies of this abstract CPU is the virtual memory swap file is XML. I swap out, so I might have like an open tag, the word unsigned byte, or unsigned short, and then say close tag, the number 1.
Wow.
So, I mean,
I bet your software, your code was probably like 100% more readable than anyone else's too.
It's fantastically readable, and in this particular case, because the goal was speed, it's incredibly slow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was written as I literally took out an operating systems book and said, how do you do demand-based paging? How do you do virtual memory?
Yeah.
And I looked at their algorithm, and I wrote the pseudocode. And the pseudocode looked an awful lot like C#, and then I wrote the C#. So you can literally read this and get an idea about how choosing a victim for a page would look like.
Interesting. So how popular was it?
Well, I couldn't just let it sit there. I needed to kind of spread the word, because intellectual property, whether it's an assignment or not, it's some work was there, and to let it lie fallow would have been a shame. So I stuck it up on got.net, the .NET community site.
Right.
And darn it if it didn't become popular and get featured on the front page of got.net. And I think it's something like 5,600 or 5,700 downloads later.
Wow.
And then I translated it to VB.net, which was a hilarious thing. I used the
funny.
C# to VB.net translator, tweaked a bunch of the code. There were some signed, unsigned issues.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, some of the integers that I used were unsigned, and VB.net complained because they weren't CLS compliant. But once I cleaned those kind of issues
how'd you get around that, by the way?
Well, it's one of my secret shames. I ended up just using a data type that was double wide, and using only the higher bytes.
That'll work.
Along and use the upper ones. And then I had a little bit of code that would take things like an array of 4 bytes and turn it into an int.
Oh, right,
and
sure.
Vice versa.
Yep.
So I would just change that in the VB.net version, which basically lied to the rest of the system.
Right,
things were okay. Which is a good example. I mean, I completely encapsulated that kind of functionality. So the memory subsystem changed slightly for VB.net, but it didn't hurt anyone else.
So how long have you been a programmer?
I have been coding for money since 1991.
Okay.
I started a small business out of in high school. I graduated in high school in 1992. 91, I was doing C code, like back when Hello World was 93 lines of code, SDK stuff.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in like 93, 94, 95 when Windows 95 was just coming out, helping people write single source code compiling to both 16-bit and 32-bit.
Right.
So I would spend half my time in Visual C++ 151 and half in the new version of whatever Visual Studio was called at the time, the new 32-bit compiler, and then doing all sorts of if-defs to make sure that the same exact MFC application would compile for 16-bit and 32-bit, and then use the same underlying database.
So your company that you work for now, Carillion, what do they do?
Carillion does web banking. We have an application server called Voyager, and when you want to go on to, say, Bank One or Washington Mutual or one of these larger banks and check your bills, do bill pay, check your accounts, maybe download things into Quicken or Microsoft Money, or maybe now you have Quicken or Microsoft Money and you're connecting over literally a consumer-based web service that's called OFX, the Open Financial Exchange, which is not a web service in the SOAP sense of it, but in the XML over HTTP sense, it's arguably a web service.
Right.
We write all of that infrastructure, that middleware that sits between the web server and the host.
Cool.
So it's kind of e-finance, host integration, all the things that are involved in that. It's a pretty exciting thing.
So you guys are responsible for the bank nickel and diming me to death?
That would be me. I'm actually the guy that writes the code that puts the message in the queue that
get nickel
charges
function.
You the nickel.
Yeah, get nickel, get dime, functions like that, right?
Right. I've implemented all of those interfaces.
God, don't banks suck? Banks are the worst, aren't they?
I'm getting a little frustrated with the whole idea of it's your 6th ATM withdrawal of the month, and now it's time to hit you for $1.
Oh, come on. I know. It's ridiculous.
I know. I'd even rather pay $20 a year to have unlimited ATM just not to have that kind of little niggling detail of here's $1,
Right.
Here's the privilege.
I'm just
doing the whole debit card thing.
Me too.
Cash back.
Yeah, me too.
That's when you nail them.
Yes, I'd like some of my money. Well, why? Well, because it's my money. Well, we're going to have to charge you for that. It's my money, And I like it also when you don't have enough money in there, then they take more from you.
And then charge you for the privilege.
And charge you for the privilege, right.
Yeah.
But the guy who's got all the money in the world, they give him money. And the people that don't have money, they take money away from it. It's just
the rich
screwed
get richer.
up. I think, most people just have a bank account because, they have to write checks and they have to make secure transactions. I can't wait for the day when all of them just bite the dust.
All the banks go away and it's all just pickle jars?
On some common protocol, that's a much simpler than the big behemoth. And, we can surf our own cash, etc. Just can't wait.
I don't know if we're enabling that kind of functionality.
No, I don't think we will, but I think eventually it's going to happen.
Well, one of the things that I get to be involved in while working at Carillion is dealing with what are the next web services for finance going to look like.
Okay.
There's protocols like the IFX Financial Exchange Protocol or OFX, which is the Open Financial Exchange Protocol. When banks move money, whether it be from consumer to bank or from bank to bank, I have to deal with that. And banks have been dealing with structured data like XML, or the original version of OFX was actually SGML.
Yeah.
They've been doing this for years. Believe it or not, Microsoft Money, I think 95 or 97, has been moving structured XML back and forth over HTTP for quite a few years now. So
makes sense. I mean,
it's the obvious first thing for a web service.
Sure. So have you had any experience upgrading applications from old versions of C or C-Sharp or C++ or VB or Access or anything?
Yeah, actually in a number of different ways. On the larger scale, our application, the Voyager platform, is a C++, multi-threaded COM, DCOM, probably 3, arguably even 4-tier application. And we can talk about that, but one interesting little thing that I did was for a small local nonprofit here in Portland, Oregon, called Pioneer Courthouse Square. Every city has got that buy a brick and get your name on it kind of deal.
Oh, yeah.
Seattle at Pike Place, buy a brick and $20 and then you can go hunting for your brick.
Yeah.
There's something like 100,000 bricks in Portland at this square, which is at the center of Portland, of the city. And literally they've had these things written in spreadsheets, on paper, on photocopies, in Excel.
Huh.
where's your brick? Well, I bought this brick in 1981.
That's just dying for an application.
It was killing me. This was actually years ago when I went to work with them just on a pro bono kind of a thing. I think it was like back in VB3 Access 2 days.
Oh, boy.
And, oh, man, it was one of those things where I had a bunch of ladies in a line who would type this stuff into Excel, then just give me the Excel. I'd import it into Access 2, and then a couple 100,000 bricks later, they came up with a scheme for numbering the bricks, but the square downtown has been built up and changed, so there's no real nice, clean battleship-style A5 grid.
Right.
There's, your thing could be at like Z95 or B12, and they could be next to each other. So there was no real clean business rule there. So I wrote a whole bunch of code I'm ashamed of, just hairy, horrible code in VB3 to do a little rich client application. And it worked for years. It printed out the thing. It would do a nice little WinAPI GDI drawing of an X over a map to show you kind of where, within a few feet, where your brick is. And it worked happily. And every once in a while, they'd update the Access database. But then recently, I was thinking to myself, what would be a fantastic demo that I could give that would be harmless, but would get people engaged when I give my presentations? And there's just something personal about this brick finder. And I was thinking, I'm just going to go and write this thing over again in .NET.
So you didn't upgrade then?
Well, so I got this VB3 application, and I said, how can I get this from VB3 to VB.NET? It's too far.
Yeah.
I know I can get the data out from Access. So I took the data out, took it into Access 2002, and then from there did a DTS into SQL Server 2000. So that was easy. And then used a stored proc in lieu of a query in Access. And then I said, well, VB3 to VB.NET is too far. I'm going to upgrade it via the standard ways that we upgrade things, switching data grids, going from DAO to ADO, and go in from VB3 to VB6.
Okay.
Got the thing running fine in VB6. Then I realized that all of the code to view the bricks in a grid is really pretty commoditized. It's not really useful. It's, go to the database, get some stuff, put it in a grid. What the real work was that spaghetti code, those pages and pages of select case statements that I don't want anyone to see.
Yeah, you're selecting logic.
They may suck, but they work.
Yeah.
I mean, they suck egregiously, mind you, but it would take me longer to try to get them as nuanced as they are and get them working again if I wrote them over again. So I just took that chunk of where is the brick on the map logic and put it into a VB.NET drawing DLL, using the VB.NET upgrade wizard, walking through all the best practices exactly like the MSDN online cookbooks say that you should.
Okay.
Then I made a separate DLL that handles drawing. It would take a graphics interface from .NET.
Graphics object, yeah.
Graphics object, rather. Drop the bitmap on it and then decide where the X goes and then hand it back. And I did that for a specific reason, that I wanted to have a rich client application written in .NET, a WinForms app, and I wanted to reuse that exact same component to do dynamically generated GIFs in ASP.NET.
Cool.
And, darn it if it didn't work. There was tuning of the select statement, but for the most part, I used simple data types, ints and longs, things converted cleanly.
Yeah.
I had to rewrite all the grid code again, but we can do that visually.
Right.
And I ended up putting it up at pioneercourthousesquare.com. Hosted it with ORCS Web, fantastic guys over there. The whole thing was done in like 2 days. 2 days of screwing around. And now they can use the exact same data DLLs and the exact same graphics drawing DLLs with that horrible code hidden comfortably in a black box that no one will ever see. And then I could make it a web service pretty easily. Right.
So what if somebody came up to you and said, I have this VB6 application that I want to upgrade to .NET, what's your first reaction?
Rather than having a first reaction like do it, don't do it, it really depends on what it's doing.
Right.
I've seen VB6 people who have 30 data-bound, entirely kind of VB6 connected fat client type apps.
Yeah.
I would probably say start over. That's a non-trivial thing. They used all the data binding that VB6 sold them, all the data grids. That's
because there is no connected model with ADO.
That's a very subtle house of cards.
Yep.
And if it works, use it.
Right.
Now, if they came to me like with something that I had, where they had a simple grid or two and a whole series of non-user interface, non-database-based business logic.
Right.
Doing some kind of analytical processing of some kind. Then I think it's possible.
Sure.
I think it's possible. There are issues that came along like overflows of data types, dividing by a / as opposed to dividing by a \. Little subtle things.
What about graphics like GDI API stuff?
That was a paradigm shift. Because GDI Plus is so fundamentally different than GDI and so much fundamentally simpler, all of that Windows SDK code that I had back in Windows 3.1 and then consequently in VB6 was all those declare function,
right,
doing all these bit blitz myself.
HDC-centric kind of stuff.
Exactly, rather than releasing DCs and keeping track of, I remember how when there were only 16 DCs or 12 DCs that were available in the system. Rather than worrying about any of that, I thought about the logic that it was trying to accomplish, and literally took 4 pages of really complicated code to draw this stupid line, and turned it into I don't know, 15, 20 lines of GDI code.
It's so cool, isn't it?
Draw X. I handed a brick object, it draws the X. It was like literally nothing. And passing these graphics objects around, even though we as kind of .NET insiders realize that the graphics object is really just a thin layer over the top of a DC,
DC,
device
right,
context.
with some great methods on it.
Yeah, they've insulated it so well that you just don't sweat it.
I especially love, creating an image like a bitmap in memory, getting a graphics from it, draw, text, fonts, whatever, graphics, anything you like, and do whatever you want with it. Save it, print it. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally like the printing example. I had entirely separate draw it differently based on the DPI of the printer code in VB6.
Yeah.
If anyone's worked with the printer object in VB6, it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So it was write a bunch of code to draw to the screen and write a bunch of code to draw to the printer. With this, it was literally like writing English. It was like new image, I have image.load,
Right.
It was just cheese. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then taking that graphics object, passing back the image, and then this time instead passing it into ASP.NET, then saying response.content type, setting the MIME type to image/GIF or image/JPEG, serializing it out to a memory stream, and then suddenly a graphic appears on the screen. It's fantastic.
Very cool. And we'll be right back after these messages with Scott Hanselman right here on .NET Rocks. Stick around. Hey, so I'm looking at the current issue of MSDN Magazine. Hey, there's this guy, Carl Franklin, who wrote one of the feature stories in there about Visual Studio.NET 2003. What you need to know today about the new and upgraded features in Visual Studio.NET 2003, which should be out shortly. It should be out in May. As a matter of fact, the launch is going to be in April, the end of April, and you should have a local launch event in your town or somewhere near there around the 1st of May or sometime in May. Check your local Microsoft office for that. Anyway, there are other great articles in this March issue of MSDN Magazine. Chris Sells does a great job of telling you what's new in Windows Forms in Framework 1.1, Visual Studio Net 2003, and talking about security, language support. Excellent article all about compatibility, things like that. And Juval Lowy, our friend, writes an article about contexts in .NET and how that you can use custom services and syncs by sort of sticking yourself in between the component and the CLR and providing custom services, compression, encryption, whatever you want to do. Very powerful stuff, and Juval's a very smart guy and explains it very well. Hey, if you haven't guessed by now, MSDN Magazine is the premier magazine for serious .NET developers. Don't joke around. I mean, get the right stuff from the best sources there are, the experts that are out there doing this stuff. Check it out at msdn.microsoft.com/msdnmag, or just click on the MSDN logo on our .NET Rocks website. Now let's get back to our interview with Scott Hanselman, Regional Director for Portland, Oregon, and talking about a lot of code issues, talking about reflection, regular expressions, multi-threading, and lots more right here on .NET Rocks. Don't go away.
There's some really exciting sample code up on ASP.NET right now on the website, www.asp.net. The reporting SDK includes a lot of really great code to teach people how to take data sets and turn them into dynamically generated pie charts, bar charts.
What's the reporting SDK? I haven't seen that.
It's some kind of bit of sample code, kind of a la Northwind or Fabricam, one of these sample applications that they're giving away up on ASP.NET, the community site for ASP. And they're including this series of sample code as well as objects to abstract the drawing away from you, where you can hand in arrays of numbers and bits of information to a bar charting class. It doesn't have the kind of rich charting interface that you'd expect from a component vendor like Infragistics or Dundas, but it does have the beginnings of understanding, like what I went and taught myself, how to figure out how to draw to an image context, and an image object rather, and then print it out to the screen. They had some really neat techniques that I think if I was going to go back and do it again, I'd probably look at some of those techniques that they offer in that free code.
You are a big proponent of, things that are free on the web. Why are you more apt to try some shareware or freeware utilities if they're written in .NET?
There's a feeling I get when I see a component that looks fantastic. The first time you see a component vendor's site or some Joe Freeware's site, and you see the screenshot, and you go, "Ooh, I can use that."
Yeah.
Because the first thing I do is I don't want to see the FAQ, I don't want to see your doc. If you don't have a screenshot thumbnail that I can click on and get a larger screenshot, I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
I see the screenshot. Then I download it. I see a setup.exe, and I get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I run that setup, and there's a certain color of blue, a certain kind of a blue gradient that I see, and a certain font style and a certain button style. If it's got a funky OK button, or maybe that OK button has a big green checkbox
not a lot of
next to
thought put into it.
And I go, oh my God, what was this thing written in?
Yeah.
What system DLL is this thing going to write over?
Yeah.
What VB6 VM version are they using that they're going to just completely obliviously copy over? And then what if I just want to check it out?
Right.
With .NET, there's none of that. I mean, literally, you get a zip file with a readme.txt and an exe.
Yeah.
You get kind of all the benefits of a rich environment of Windows and the simple ease of deployment that you get on like a Linux or a DOS. You copy it into a folder and you check it out.
Yeah.
So instead of having a cluttered C:\program files folder with 15 different utilities I use, I've just got C:\utils, and I've got 118 little exes in there.
So you write a lot of your own utilities too?
Yeah, I'm really getting big into command line utilities again. When you add the Windows equivalent of the cron job, the task scheduler,
right,
and the power of either running something as a service that you wrote in .NET or using a simple command line interface, I've got a lot of batch jobs that are running in the background doing things. I have a batch job that pulls information out of a specific Outlook folder and saves it into a specific format of XML for consumption by a website. So my business users can post to an Outlook folder, I suck it out automatically, put it into XML, and then style it out to the web.
You'll like this one. I found a place on the web where I get a Northeast New England satellite weather map that's updated every 5 minutes. And I put that as a service just to go and download it, put it into my desktop graphic. And so I get that up in my upper right-hand corner. I'm always looking at the current weather overhead.
Totally. It's a perfect example. And, another kind of silly example, but one that saves people time is we have a series of logs here. Various programs create various logs. And some of these different disparate systems have log files that are not the same. There may be debug logs that somebody just kind of whipped out. So they have different date formats, different formats for different pieces of context that they load into a file.
Yeah.
If I want to look at those in a unified sense, I could write a Perl script, which would be terse and confusing, but possible. Or I could just use the regex class, write a nice, simple command line utility that would go and say, see all those logs? Figure it out and stick it into a database, or spit it out as a unified log.
So
sort by date while you're at it.
Define regex for us.
Okay, so regex is the regular expressions library that the .NET framework includes. And one of the really powerful things about the .NET framework, when you compare it to the other frameworks that are out there, like VB6 could be arguably a framework, and MFC is a framework, and writing code in ASP is a framework, is that the knowledge that you learn when you become a MFC guy or you become a ASP gal, is that switching paradigms is complicated. Being able to go from being an MFC person and an MFC mindset and all of the utilities and the APIs that you memorize when you're an MFC person, and switching that over into another world is almost impossible. It's non-trivial. You're basically becoming a whole new kind of programmer.
Yeah.
When you're in .NET, they've unified the API in such a way that a convenience and a convenient utility class that you learn in one environment on the web can be used on in WinForms. And regex is one of the perfect examples of an incredibly powerful, complete little engine in and of itself that the .NET programmer could utilize anywhere. I use it in the command line. I use it in my ASP.NET applications. I use it in my WinForms. And regular expressions are a little, I wouldn't call them a markup language. You can probably help me with the best way to describe it.
It's sort of like a formatting language.
Yeah, it's like it's a really extended version of what you'd expect when you do like a printf. You want to describe exactly a pattern that matches within a string.
Yeah.
You can do search patterns, substitution patterns. You can say something the equivalent of, I'm going to be getting a date, and it's probably going to be DD month, year, but it could also possibly be DD month, year. And when you do see that, I would like to then have it returned in this other format.
Is this something? Is this something that's worth learning, the regular expression syntax, or is this something that is a little too obtuse for most people?
It really kind of depends. Regular expressions are a terse way of expressing what you could do in, 100 lines of left stir, mid stir, in stir type string processing functions.
Yeah.
It's a declarative way of expressing what could be expressed programmatically. And I think that difference between being declarative and being programmatic is an important part about .NET.
Right. And
attributes are another example of where you could write a lot of code or you could just decorate something.
Yeah.
I think that although it's terse, if you're doing string parsing, if you're doing string manipulation of any kind that is a little more complicated than just give me the left 4 characters or just grab that third word, I think regular expressions are worth looking at. It's worth noting it's really arguably a language in and of itself, and but it's also a skill that you'll use other places.
Right.
If I learned regular expressions, probably maybe 50%, 60%, and the rest I can just look it up.
True.
But there's lots of fantastic utilities. Krita has got a utility.
What reference did you use to learn the?
Well, actually, I collected a series of regular expressions libraries and repositories, and I put them up on my website at computerzen.com. There's 5 or 6 different online repositories. I know that the guys at 3Leaf Software at 3leaf.com have got a regular expression repository. There are databases of searchable things. But though these are for simple things, like if you want to simply have a regular expression that validates if an URL is correct or that a British date is in the format that the Brits like.
Yeah.
But typically I use visual designers of regular expressions. There's a .NET one called, I think it's regexdesigner.net that Chris Sells has. There's one called Espresso that lets you generate the entire regular expression without ever having to type anything. You just select checkboxes and select pull downs. And I put all those up on my website. And I'll leave a link of all the different things that we talk about today.
We'll have that up on the site. Sure. Very cool. Yeah, I noticed I think Dan Appleman has an article on regular expressions, and there's some other articles out there on the web that explain it. I've sort of just been limited to what the regular expression validator in ASP.NET does, which is a very cool thing, by the way. That's just unbelievable.
Well, there's also regexlive.com, which is a pretty good one. They've got about 200 or 300 regular expressions.
Oh, cool.
There's also a regular expression workbench at got.net.
Interesting.
Dan Appleman's got that book that I think is like a $9 book. And there's also a nice site called the DAO. It's a TAO. The DAO of Regular Expressions, which is another good site on regular expressions.
So the URL is the DAO of regularexpressions.com?
I would just search Google for the DAO of Regular Expressions. It's actually sitescooper.org or something like that.
Okay.
But there's also a tool called Sharp Develop, which is a kind of an open source C# IDE that has a built-in regular expressions builder. So there's really 3 or 4 visual builders as well as a series of books and articles you can use on learning the syntax.
That brings me to a great question, which is, the config files in .NET can be very frustrating to use, especially if you're a VB programmer who's not used to case sensitivity and just having to nail it exactly right, you know. I saw an early configurator program out there for .NET config files, you know, web config or your application config or even machine config, but I haven't really seen any in a long time, and I was wondering if you use them or if you know of any good resources.
Sure. There's one from a company called Hunter Stone. It's called the Hunter Stone Web.config editor.
Cool. One
of the cool things about web.config and machine.config and their relationships is that although they're kind of spread all over the disk, and with web.config and your ASP.NET applications, you can have hierarchies of web.config. So you can have like a parent site that then has a child site that then allows overriding of some settings, and then that child site can override some things.
Yeah.
Hunter Stone, this company's got this little utility that recognizes and searches down kind of recursively and finds all of the web.configs, and then lets you view them as one tree of kind of conceptual declarative rules that will be applied to this series of web applications. It's a
nice.
Really cool application. It actually attaches itself to the config extension. So when you double-click on a config file within Visual Studio.NET, you find yourself in their editor.
Oh, that's great. Where can I get that?
It's a company called Hunter Stone, and let me find out.
Well, we'll get a URL up there.
Sure, we'll get a URL. It's a
Great.
fantastic application. It's really inexpensive. It's like hunterstone.com.
Oh, that's great. I can't tell you how much I've been looking for one of those things. Well, I haven't been looking, but every time I get in there in the config files and I say to myself,
there's got to be a better way. XML is great, but this is a tree. Show me a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Especially remoting. There aren't a lot of great examples of configuration for remoting, and yet that's probably the most important part of it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so what are some other great add-ons or add-ins? You built an add-in? Ever built one?
I've built add-ins for Outlook. I've built add-ins for Word, and I have built wizards for Visual Studio.NET, but I haven't actually written an add-in for VS.NET, but that's actually on my plate for the next couple of months to write some add-ins.
I know a big part of writing add-ins and writing code and looking at code is reflection, and not a lot of people know what that is or, have had just a vague idea. Can you define reflection for us, or just tell us what it does, what it is, why it's important?
Well, reflection is one of those things that's hard to get your finger on if you're not familiar with it or you haven't had it baked into your brain. It's a way that allows you to programmatically examine metadata of a particular type and those types' members. So if you have some object, that object is an instance of some type. And like if you've programmatically accessed some COM type libraries before, then reflection in .NET is very similar, but it's a lot more powerful. It's a lot more straightforward. All the types in .NET, any type at all, whether they're reference types or value types, are basically derived from system.object.
Yeah.
So what's exciting about that is that the system.object has a GetType method.
Yes.
That GetType method returns an instance of a type called system.type.
Which is a source of confusion among my students sometimes.
Yeah, it is. How do you explain it?
I say, it's confusing. I say some functions require a type object and some require the name of the type, and just get used to having to deliver a type object sometimes. And if you have to do that, then you use GetType. Yeah.
Yeah, type is just another object that describes the object that you called GetType on.
Yeah.
So, the system.type provides a number of APIs that allow you to retrieve information about that type, all the different things. And all of those those descriptive classes and descriptive objects have an info suffix. So you'd have like member info, property info, constructor info.
Right.
So you might say something like, you might have a function that takes a type. So then someone would pass in the object and call GetType on it, returning a type. And you could say something like type.getMethods.
Yeah.
You could say, give me all the public methods. I want to know what exactly is going on in this cat object, so I'm going to go and enumerate it. And then I'll say getMethods, and I'll ask for the binding flags of that particular method, and I'll say, give me all the public methods, and that'll return an array of member information.
Those binding flags are a little tricky.
They are a little complicated.
Yeah, I'm still yet to trying to figure out how to get a list of public events that doesn't include all sorts of other crazy things that I don't want.
Right. If you say public, if you say binding flags public and binding flags instances, you get everything.
Everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So
you usually have to go in the middle of your for loop. When you say for each, you've got to go and clean it up, and that's not really comfortable.
I'm sure I'll find a solution. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. Reflection is something. If you want to get a list of the properties, get a list of the methods or the classes that are in this assembly, any of that metadata. You can even look at. Can you look at attributes as well?
Sure, you can look at attributes. You can even look at non-public things, depending on what kind of access rights that you have. But the thing that's funny about reflections is a lot of people say, "Well, so
right?
Why that's interesting for a demo, but tell me something that's going to make my life better." And there's a fantastic add-in for VisualStudio.net that allows you to write tests. There's a proliferation of testing and unit testing going on in the .NET environment right now.
Right. As
a port of a previous unit testing framework called JUnit for Java has been ported over to .NET called NUnit.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And a lot of people are doing what's called test-driven development, where rather than going and writing a cat object and writing cat.meow and scratch my furniture, they actually write the test first and then write the object and continue to write the object until it passes all of the tests. That's one way to do it. Other people find themselves with code, like my TinyOS, for example, that they didn't write any tests for, and maybe they're feeling bad about it. I don't want to have to go and tediously write tests for every single public member that's in my class. Wouldn't it be nice if I could hand some program, my tinyos.exe, and say, write some code for me. Give me a test this and test that. So with Reflection, there's an add-in for NUnit. It's literally just go up on Google and search for NUnit add-in, all one word.
Okay.
And it sits inside of Visual Studio, and there are ways with macros where you can say, take that assembly, iterate over everything, and then using the code DOM, which is an object model on top of code, go and write a series of tests. So if I have cat.meow and cat.scratchmyfurniture, and I say, here, go and generate a test for that, I'll get a test case that derives from the NUnit base class for tests, and it'll go and write stubs for test meow and test scratch on my furniture. And it's got me, 30% of the way there and doing a lot of work that would have ordinarily been really quite tedious.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about reflection is not necessarily reflection in the context of a runtime situation. It can be just as much in the context of a design time. Right.
Very good. So, there's a huge movement to share code in the .NET community. There's lots of websites. There's forums like the forum that I'm up on, vbcity.com, in the VBNet forum, for example. There's tons of just little pieces of code, classes, and projects and zip files flying around the internet everywhere. What's so compelling about sharing code in .NET?
Well, .NET and the concept of an assembly that is completely self-contained. An assembly is self-contained. I don't have to hand someone a VB6 DLL with a .reg file or say, here's this DLL, register it, I don't want to give you the code, I worked really hard, trust me, it's good code, register this, and then this will let you put an icon in the system tray, or this will let you pop up a balloon tooltip. People don't have this sense of hanging on to what is commoditized code.
Yeah.
.NET is raising the water level. We're getting higher and higher levels of abstraction. People want to solve compelling and interesting business problems.
Right.
They don't want to hoard their little piece of code that shows you how to put an icon in the tray.
Right. In other words, you're finding less people worried about people disassembling their code to see what their business logic does, and more to the point, people are more concerned about maybe protecting data, but protecting your code isn't such a big deal anymore, because after all, the whole of the application that somebody's going to steal or do whatever to.
From my point of view as someone in the banking industry, I wouldn't say that we're not concerned about someone stealing our code, but I would say that .NET has really made it clear what's commoditized.
Right.
If I know Windows, here's a good example. If I know Windows can do something, this is the thing that would keep me awake at night. Someone gave me a task, a business user gives me a task, and he says, figure this out. And I'll spend a day or two fighting with Visual Basic 6 or fighting with MFC to figure out, I know that Windows lets me do this.
Right.
What is the magic incantation to do that?
Yeah.
And then once I found it after busting my ass for a week, I'm going to hoard that because that's makes me smarter.
Right.
It has nothing to do with what the business guy asked me to do.
Yeah.
In .NET is unlocking what was previously hard in Windows is easy.
Right.
Here's 6 lines of code to pop up a tooltip balloon. I'm in e-banking. I don't care. Now, my e-banking algorithms, I will use code signing, I will use strong names, I will use obfuscators, because that's my intellectual property. That has nothing to do with codeproject.com or VB-City.
Right.
But there's just it's so funny. I spend so much less time in .NET saying, gosh, how am I supposed to do this? Because there's so many other people out there that are willing to share. And the method in which they share is either here's some source code and here's a public license that it's under, or here's a really convenient assembly. You don't have to register it, just use it. Knock yourself out.
Right. Yeah, I found that was true with, I needed some code to validate an email address. Mm-hmm. And that hinged on the fact that I needed a way to look up a DNS server and make a query for an MX record, basically. Mm-hmm. And the only place that I searched Google, I searched everywhere, the only thing I found was a Russian website where there was some C-sharp code that did that. And it was there in its entirety. I literally copied it out of the browser, pasted it into a new project in Visual Studio, and compiled it. And it ran.
Isn't that fantastic?
It was just awesome.
Yeah. I've got to say that I probably am writing 60% of what I'm writing, I'm really writing, and the rest of it is found.
Yeah.
And when I say found code, it doesn't mean it has a lack of quality because it's transparent. I can look at it and I can go, oh,
right.
Here's how this guy exposed the underlying security ACLs of NT via, interop with pinvoke.
Yeah.
Now I know too. And what that means is that we all get smarter. I mean, literally, .NET makes you a better programmer, but it makes you smarter because as they say in all the .NET marketing literature, the ceiling, not CEI, but rather ceiling SEAL of .NET is so much higher. You can look into places that they never let you look before.
Right. As
a VB6 guy for a number of years, we were always told, don't look over there. Don't look at that's the runtime.
Right. You're not concerned with that.
You just focus on VB. VB spent so many cycles trying to keep us from understanding what was inside. And what was the first thing you did in VB6 is you tried to figure out how to get around it with an OCX or a message cracker.
Right.
.NET says you can be as high or as low level as you want.
One thing I particularly love about the framework is that all the objects, especially the controls, the graphical controls, GDI controls, all those controls have been written with, methods that would normally be private methods have been protected overridable. So they've set you up to override these functions, that would normally happen at a low level inside of the component. And of course, you can just look at it. You can just disassemble. You can use reflection. You can look at in the debugger, all the private members, all the public members. Go to town. It's
There's a
beautiful.
Fantastic tool from the guy who wrote Reflector. I think his name is, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's German, but his name is like Lutz Roeder. It's called the LSW Reflection Browser. And it's a typical kind of hand it in assembly and I'll reflect over it and show you all of the types and methods in a tree view. But where it changes is he'll disassemble it and then give you a drop-down that allows you to pick the language you want to view the disassembly in.
Wow.
Show it to me in C-sharp. Show it to me in this and that.
Wow.
It's a fantastic tool. It's from the same guy that brought us Reflector and Resourcer. And the ability to look at that, even though the CLR will remove the names of local variables, and we'll see things like local 1 and local 2, it really gives you an idea of program flow.
Have you found any golden nuggets in the .NET framework that you didn't know were there recently?
Golden nuggets. I wouldn't have, I couldn't pick one out, but one thing I could say is that I found myself wondering how the string builder class in .NET dealt with multi-threading.
Yeah, okay.
And I tried to run around inside of the Windows implementation and just couldn't quite figure it out. I'm not that good at reading IL, and I really don't choose to be. So then I went over and found the Rotor source code, which is the shared source initiative for Microsoft, the Linux or BSD version, rather, of .NET. And I looked at the source code. And it may not be exact, but it sure gave me some insight into some of the locking and things that they were doing to provide some measure of multi-threaded smarts.
The VBNet Masterclass is very, very popular at franklins.net, but your company might have some specific needs that may or may not be addressed in the Masterclass. Well, we've brought this Masterclass as a framework on site to dozens of companies all around the United States and overseas. And what we do is we customize the content to your needs. So if you have a web-centric versus a Windows-centric application that you're building, if you desire experience in a particular technology like remoting or sockets or multi-threading or something that's not covered in the masterclass, we can do that. We can set up a custom class. We'll come on site if you've got 8 developers or more. And get this, it's the same price, whether you take it on site or whether you come to New London. Our toll-free number is 877-273-4838. And or you can just contact us through the web, www.franklins.net. If you have a VB team and you want to move them into .NET with the most amount of efficiency and getting the most bang for your buck, the VBNet Masterclass in Connecticut or on site, it's up to you. Check it out. All right, now let's get back to Scott Hanselman and .NET Rocks, where we get into the discussion about threads and threading and some great utilities as well. Stick around. So you've done a bit of asynchronous programming, multi-threaded programming, I take it?
Enough to be dangerous. You can always hurt yourself with threads.
Oh, man. I think Dan Appleman has sufficiently scared all the VB programmers with his book, Moving to VBNet, which was out, one of the first VBNet books that was out, by the way, on Beta 2. And that's the first text that I read on thread. Now I'm a VB programmer, okay? So the whole idea of threading was new to me until about a year ago. And I mean, I've known about threads and multi-threading, but programming it, in other words, I wasn't one of those guys who was on the bleeding edge of VB6 doing multi-threaded applications. Just wasn't me. And yeah, he sufficiently scared me enough to think, okay, well, I really have to think this through. I could set a value on one line of code and read it on the next line, and it could be different than what I set it to. Anyway, I have found that in my multi-threaded designs, I've been seeing more and more people using shared members to get around thread synchronization issues.
Ooh.
Now, is that
to read from or to write to?
To read from.
Okay.
To read from. Now, tell us what the deal is with that. I mean, with shared members in the framework, there's a lot of shared classes or shared members. Or if you have a shared variable of this type, it's thread safe. If you don't, it's not.
Right, shared in VB.NET being static. In CSharp.
Right.
I'm probably not the best guy to talk about that. I don't know what I don't know exactly or understand exactly where static in .NET specifically where those are living.
Okay.
And when is access to a shared member synchronized?
Right.
Or is it one of those things where we don't know and we just let it happen? I don't know. My biggest problems with threading in .NET are that there's still a message pump underneath WinForms.
Yeah.
And doing nice, clean, multi-threaded fat clients is non-trivial, as it always has been. And the most help I've got out of that is reading the calculating the digits of pi example that Chris Sells put up on.
Right, where we call invoke on the form. And,
exactly. So is invoke required, basically.
Yeah.
And I would have to say that if the average VB Forms programmer were going to get involved in multi-threaded programming, from a user interface point of view, I would limit themselves to like the form thread and a background thread.
Yeah.
And find a nice library that hides that from them. Make sure to call is invoke required and then invoke if they need to.
Yeah.
Really think about it as a place to queue things and let me know when it's done. Just in the sense of
just to save the appearance of being responsive.
Up the UI.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I tell people, Scott.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't have a lot of experience in that I really would like to understand is what I want to know is exactly what's happening in the underneath. I know that in Java, there's the notion of green threads and native threads. There's kind of the Java simulation of a thread, and then there's the notion of an operating system or native thread.
Right.
Is there any similar construct in .NET? I mean, or is it really just a thread is a thread?
No, I know that's true.
That is true.
Yeah,
Create thread and new thread are the same thing.
Well, yeah. A thread in a .NET thread is not an OS thread. It's an abstraction of an OS thread.
So it would be what we'd call a green thread.
Yes.
In Java terms.
Yes. Now, it relates one-to-one with an OS thread, but it's a thread class, right?
So they have a secret hidden shadow friend who's there, the thread
you got it.
in the back.
Yeah.
Well,
and I learned that, interestingly enough, from Don Box and Chris Sell's book about .NET.
Really? I'm about halfway through that right now.
Yep.
It's a fantastic book.
Isn't it great?
It's hard to read. Don is a very he says it in the opening. He's a terse kind of a guy, and you kind of have to iterate over his sentences.
Essential.net is the name of that book. We'll provide a link to that, too.
Yeah.
I think that thing about threads is right in the beginning where he's talking about contexts and application domains and threads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I want to understand is that when we're tuning threading in the config files, for example, with ASP.NET, there's been a lot of talk about the spots in the process model section of web.config of max IO threads and max worker threads.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who are receiving a great deal of requests to an ASP.NET application, and then consequently trying to get back out, they're trying to have that ASP.NET app call a web service.
Yeah.
On their highly loaded boxes are running out of threads by which to make that call out.
Yeah.
So getting that web request and the underlying socket to pop up is a problem. So what are the right settings when you have a very kind of I/O intensive?
Well, I know that the thread pool has a limit by default of 25 threads.
Right, per CPU.
Yes, and you can bump that up. And you can also write your own thread pool. It's not that big a deal. I mean, you just have to serve up a thread, and, determine which one is in use or whatever.
Right, but there's some little things underneath of .NET, like, for example, WinINet and the HTTP stuff, where, for example, like officially in the HTTP protocol, you're not allowed to make more than 2 calls out as a client of a server.
Huh.
So there's this setting in the bowels of the registry that says, I will go ahead and break the spec and make that call out. So if you're doing like, HTTP 1.1, you make a call and you want to reuse that connection.
Yeah.
But if you have 50, 60 things all trying to reuse the same connection, you might want to make a new connection. The spec and Windows limits you to 2. That's in the RFC for HTTP, section 8.1.4. That's something that's going on in the bowels. I shouldn't have to think about that kind of stuff, but inevitably, once my design is set up, I find myself spending the most time debugging .NET on the border between .NET and the real world, .NET and the OS.
I've got several peeves with WinINet. Just the fact that, if you make a connection to something that isn't there, it just sits there, and it just sits there and sits there. And if you don't do that on a background thread, you're really going to hose yourself.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It is a problem.
Clemens Vasters made an interesting comment that when you were going to be talking to some external resource, some precious resource, whether it be a database or whether it be a web service, have the component hosted inside of ComPlus, inside of Enterprise Services, and let them figure it out.
That's a good idea.
Which is kind of an interesting way to kind of push the responsibility back to someone who presumably has solved that problem before.
Do you find yourself using sockets a lot? I mean, a lot of people ask me, Carl, you're Mr. Sockets. What's so great about them? Why wouldn't I just use a web service or remoting? Why should I implement my own interface?
Well, from the point of view of us and myself as an architect of a banking company, we're going to have 10,000, 20,000 people online trying to transfer money around.
Right.
And the difference between me sending a custom binary format right on the top of TCP that takes, 30 bytes, and the difference between sending some, whether it's compressed or not, some SOAP message that's going to be on the order of a couple of 100 bytes.
Right.
And then you do that a million times, you're talking about some serious bandwidth. I mean, it's literally the difference between a few gigabytes a day to, a couple of 100 megs a day.
Yep.
It's orders of magnitude. So that's why what we do for our load balance, we have an implementation of component load balancing. That's our own custom thing, meant to tune and spread out COM objects. We use DCOM, and I think when we move to using remoting, we'll probably think about binary remoting as opposed to using web services for those kinds of low-level details.
Right.
As much as I like the high-level experience that SOAP gives you, when you write something generically, like SOAP has been written, it will always be slower. And when you write something specific in binary, it will always be faster, full stop. It can't be argued.
It's true. There's nothing faster.
Yeah, TCP/IP used to be thought of as an awfully fat protocol.
Yeah,
people were like, "Oh man, we're twiddling bits, we're changing endian, we're going big endian, little endian. What are we doing? This is work that doesn't need to be 7 layers. Who needs 7 layers for a protocol? What are we talking about?" At some point, we'll come to the time when, I don't know, there'll be a SOAP special coprocessor inside of the Pentium.
Oh no!
Handle this, but until that time, when we take that for granted, like, do you remember when you used to ask people, "I'm having trouble talking TCP/IP to you. I'm running Trumpet WinSock. What stack are you running?"
Yeah.
We had to actually debug TCP/IP
Trumpet
stacks.
WinSock.
I remember
Trumpet? That. Yes,
Fantastic.
Windows 3.1.
Exactly. Windows for Workgroup, trying to get all that stuff to work together. Do you use the Microsoft stack? Do you use the Trumpet stack?
There's a couple other stacks out there, too.
Oh, yeah.
Some third-party things. I remember if you looked in the back of PC World.
You'd always get those guys. You could buy their stack for $39, get their free Telnet tool. So if you're going to do that and worry about things at that level, which in the old days, the 90s, we had to, then, yeah, people will go, "Oh, man, this is way more... it's too heavy, man. Let's go back IPX, SPX. Let's write to a file."
It's really not that big a deal to do a sockets implementation. You get some skeleton code like you could download from my site, or there's other places. There's great books out there that just have plug-in, multi-threaded socket servers and clients. And, just to comprise like you said, your own protocol. All right, I want to send a message. Okay, well, it's going to have a structure. It's going to have 4 bytes for a long integer for an ID, and it's going to have, like 25 bytes for a string or something like that. And we're just going to put some data in that, convert it to a byte array, and send it out.
Exactly. Do I want to write this to a flat file delimited? Do I want to write this out with a structured thing like XML?
Yeah.
Sometimes a nice tight flat file, which is the equivalent of taking a
big buffer,
a binary stream of bytes and saying, "Here, it's going to look like this. Watch for that 4th byte. That's the ending," or whatever.
Right. Smoking. You have to be a little more attentive to detail, but
Well, you do. But you look at, like, if you ever take like a tool like Yet Another Trace tool from Simon Fell at Pocket Soap. Fantastic tool that really easily lets you watch the traffic go by. It's a packet sniffer.
Yeah.
It's a packet sniffer for the masses. And I was watching a lot of SOAP come out of my box. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm a developer. I've got, I think, probably 23 things in the system tray. One of those things must be talking SOAP. What's going on? I found out that my little Groove collaboration tool was pinging its server. It was hollering back and going, "Hey, it's Groove. I'm still here." I'm thinking to myself, that's an awful lot of overhead to send a SOAP message to let them know you're still here or to log yourself in.
Yeah.
But hey, it goes over HTTP, it traverses firewalls, and I'm sure it was easy to write.
True.
They chose to forget about the wire protocol.
Yeah, there's a lot of people don't know. You can still go over through the firewall with HTTP using remoting and get about 300 times the performance.
Exactly. And it's just a matter of saying, well, do I want to do this generically, reuse it, and abstract it away from myself, or do I want to make it a little more specific? Here at Carillion, we balance that. Internally, there's some proprietary things that we do, but when you're trying to do systems integration, you got to go lowest common denominator.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there any one last can't live without utility tool that you want to impart on us? Share with us?
One last, there's so many. I don't know. There's so many tools that I'm using right now. One of them is called...
Which one do you use the most?
Which tool do I use the most? If I could say there's one tool that I would install Windows and then install that tool, it would be Dave's Search Bar.
Whoa.
Dave's Search Bar, if you just go to Google and search for Dave's Search Bar, I don't know who Dave is, but he's a cool guy because he wrote a search bar. It's a text box that sits in your start menu, and not your start menu rather, but your taskbar.
Yep.
And you can type something in and it'll launch Google, right? So big deal. We've all got those. But he's built in some kind of a magical JavaScript regular expressions thing where you type in like Amazon and then the book, it'll take you to Amazon. You type in DIC for dictionary and a word, it'll take you to dictionary.com.
Cool.
You type in area code and then the area code, it'll tell you the name of the area code. It's a calculator. It'll do hex to RGB conversions.
Oh,
it'll
cool.
do ROT13. It'll do whatever. And you can write your own little things. It's basically a command line interface. It's a shell for Windows that probably saves me 100 clicks a day where I could launch up the browser and go to the favorites. Dave's Search Bar. It's God's gift. It really is. They should build it into Longhorn.
That is awesome. Well, you got any last minute words of wisdom to impart on the listening audience? Drive slow?
I would have to say that learn .NET, tell your friends, talk to anyone who will listen to you about how great it is. I literally spend time like riding on the bus, and some guy will say, hey, you got that Microsoft T-shirt on. You work for Microsoft, Can you fix my computer?
Yeah.
And I'll say, hey, man, have you heard about .NET? I'm like a happy religious convert. I want to tell everyone about my new religion and spread the good word. And I'm having a blast. And if you're not using .NET and you don't know, you need to ask somebody.
Very cool. Hey, I just one last thing is that I'm curious as to how you explain .NET to non-programmers. I explain it as it's an upgrade for Windows that's going to make your life much, much happier.
Wow. That's a really high-level way of explaining it to, like, your mom.
Right.
I usually say that in the old days, what a programmer had to say was a whole lot of complicated words to say something simple.
Uh-huh.
And with .NET, the distance between the average Joe and the programmer is shorter.
Yeah. That still doesn't make them want to install it on their computer.
To get them to install the framework, man?
Right.
Here, install this 20 megs, it'll make things better.
Yeah.
That's a real tough sell.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's true. I really do.
Upgrade
I think
for Windows. If you want to get them installed, that's a fantastic way of saying it.
It's an upgrade that when you install programs for it, they're going to be more consistent. They're not going to crash as much, and they're going to have more features. And they'll probably be written better, and you'll get upgrades quicker that do more sooner.
Microsoft ought to do that, and they ought to spin it like that. Because I'll tell you, my mom's not running .NET. She doesn't see a need. It shows up in Windows Update, and she ignores it.
Yeah.
But if you said on the home page of Microsoft.com, upgrade your Windows, get .NET, I bet you people start downloading it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
It certainly makes it easy for them to install programs and programs that work, actually.
Totally.
Okay, well, it was very enlightening listening to you talk and conversing with you. I'm sure the listening audience enjoyed it thoroughly. And thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.
You rock.
.NET rocks.
It certainly does. Thanks again, Scott. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.